The ache was a familiar tenant in my chest, a quiet resident that had taken up space sometime during the second week of Art History 405, Renaissance Rivalries. It wasn't a painful ache, not exactly. It was more of a low, persistent hum, the kind of background noise you only notice when it suddenly stops. My ache had a name, Mr. Julian Thorne. He was the source of the hum, the reason I lingered after class, the reason my notebook was filled with more charcoal sketches of his profile than actual notes on Donatello. My life had become a study in quiet dissatisfaction, a series of muted grays and beiges, and he was the one slash of vibrant, impossible color I allowed myself to observe from a distance. I lived in a state of emotional isolation, a self-imposed exile built from shyness and a deep-seated fear of taking up too much space. My days were a predictable loop: classes, library, the sterile silence of my single dorm room. I watched other people live their lives in bright, chaotic splashes, laughing in the quad, holding hands on the way to the dining hall, arguing passionately over coffee. I was a ghost at the feast, an observer by nature and by choice. This crush, this silent, all-consuming fascination with my professor, was the most intense feeling I had allowed myself in 4 years of college. It was safe because it was impossible. He was my professor, older, established, a figure of academic authority who smelled of sandalwood and old paper. I was just Leo, a face in a lecture hall of 100 others, notable only for my consistently perfect attendance and the way I probably stared a little too long. The semester was drawing to a close, a fact that filled me with a hollow sort of dread. The thought of not seeing him 3 times a week, of not having that structured opportunity to study the way his brow furrowed when he was deep in thought, or the slight, almost imperceptible quirk of his lips when a student asked a particularly insightful question, was unbearable. The hum in my chest threatened to become a roar of actual, painful loss. My final paper, a comparative analysis of Florentine and Venetian portraiture, was my last tether to him, and I was clinging to it with a desperation that bordered on pathetic. It was also, conveniently, a complete and utter mess. That was how I found myself sitting in the otherwise empty lecture hall an hour after his last class had ended. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows across the rows of empty seats. My laptop was open, the screen a tauntingly blank white page. My arguments were tangled, my thesis was weak, and my brain felt like a sponge that had been wrung dry. I knew he held late office hours on Thursdays. I told myself I was just waiting to ask a legitimate academic question. It was a flimsy excuse, a thin veil for the real reason I was there. I just wanted one more chance to be in his orbit, to breathe the same air, to hear his voice directed at me. The door at the front of the hall creaked open, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Mr. Thorne stood there, silhouetted against the bright light of the hallway. He had his leather satchel slung over one shoulder, and he'd taken off the tweed jacket he'd worn during the lecture, leaving him in a simple, dark gray button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He paused, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, and then they found me, a lone figure in the sea of empty chairs. "Leo," he said. His voice was a low, calm rumble that seemed to settle deep in my bones. He didn't sound surprised to see me, which somehow made me even more nervous. "Burning the midnight oil a little early, are we?" I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. "Something like that, Mr. Thorne. My paper, it's not coming together." He walked down the tiered steps, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He didn't stop at the lectern, but came right to the row where I was sitting, propping a hip against the desk in front of me. The scent of his cologne, that familiar mix of wood smoke and something clean and sharp like bergamot, drifted over to me. It was intoxicating. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble on his jaw. He looked tired, but his gaze was sharp, focused entirely on me. "Florentine versus Venetian?" he asked, glancing at my screen. I nodded, unable to form words. He was too close. The carefully constructed boundary of professor and student felt porous, fragile. It's a tricky thesis. It's easy to get lost in the weeds comparing brushstrokes and forget the bigger picture, the politics, the patronage, the ego. He looked from my screen to my face, and his expression softened. It was a subtle shift, a slight easing of the muscles around his mouth, but on a face I had studied with the intensity of a religious scholar, it was a seismic event. "You look exhausted," he said, the words more of a statement than a question. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice thin. He hummed, a low note of disbelief. He pushed off the desk and stood to his full height, looking around the empty hall. "This isn't the place for a breakthrough. The lighting is terrible, and the ghosts of 1,000 boring lectures are sucking all the creative energy out of the air." A ghost of a smile played on his lips. "I know a place. One of the small study rooms in the faculty wing. Better light. Quieter." He paused, his gaze locking with mine again. The intensity was unnerving, thrilling. "I have some time, if you want some help." This was it. The catalyst. An invitation into a private space, away from the formal structure of the classroom. My brain screamed at me to say no, to pack my bag and run, to preserve the safe distance I had always maintained. It was too much, too dangerous. But the ache in my chest, the yearning that had defined my entire semester, spoke louder. "Yes," I heard myself say, the word coming out as a breathy, desperate whisper. "Please." His smile widened, just a fraction, but it reached his eyes this time, crinkling the corners. "All right then. Pack up your things, Leo. Let's go wrestle with some Renaissance masters." He led the way out of the lecture hall and down a long, quiet corridor I'd never been down before. The main part of the building was emptying out, the sounds of students fading into a distant murmur. Here, in the faculty wing, it was utterly silent. The air was still, and the only sound was the soft scuff of our shoes on the polished linoleum floor. My entire consciousness had narrowed to the man walking in front of me. I watched the confident set of his shoulders, the easy, economical way he moved. He was completely at ease, while every nerve ending in my body was firing at once. He stopped in front of an unmarked wooden door and pulled a key from his pocket. The sound of the lock turning, a heavy, definitive clunk, seemed to echo in the silence, sealing us off from the rest of the world. He pushed the door open and flicked on a light switch, revealing a small, windowless room. It was crammed with a large oak table, several mismatched chairs, and one wall that was entirely a whiteboard, covered in the faint ghosts of previous equations and diagrams. The air smelled of dry erase markers and dust. "Here we are," he said, his voice softer in the enclosed space. "Cozy, isn't it?" He set his satchel on the table and turned to me. The mischievous grin I had only ever seen him direct at the class as a whole when he was about to challenge a commonly held historical belief was now directed solely at me. It was a disarming expression, making him look younger, less like a professor and more like a co-conspirator. His eyes, a shade of hazel that seemed to shift between green and brown, held a glint of something I couldn't decipher. It looked like amusement, but there was something else underneath it, something deeper and more serious. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Let's see what you've got." I sat, my movements stiff and awkward. I felt like an insect under a microscope. He didn't sit opposite me as I expected. Instead, he pulled a chair up next to me, so close that our knees were almost touching. He leaned in to look at my laptop screen, and I had to force myself to breathe. His proximity was overwhelming, a physical weight in the air. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I could see the individual threads in the fabric of his shirt, the way a single dark hair curled at his collar. My mind went blank. All my carefully constructed thoughts about Titian and Bellini evaporated, replaced by the singular, crushing awareness of Julian Thorne's physical presence. I began to stammer through my thesis, my voice cracking. He listened patiently, his gaze fixed on the screen, his chin resting on his hand. I watched his fingers, long and elegant, as they tapped a slow, thoughtful rhythm on the table. He was so still, so focused. It was the same intensity he brought to his lectures, but now it was concentrated entirely on me and my jumbled, incoherent words. I was drowning, lost in the details of his existence. The way his brow was perpetually furrowed in thought, the faint, clean scent of his soap, the quiet, almost inaudible sound of his breathing. After a few minutes of my rambling, he held up a hand, a silent command for me to stop. "Okay," he said softly. "Breathe, Leo." He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. The touch was light, meant to be reassuring, but it sent a jolt of pure electricity through me. It was a simple gesture, professor to student, but it felt monumental. His hand was warm and solid, a grounding weight. You're thinking too much. You're trying to say everything at once. Let's start from the beginning. One artist. One painting. Tell me about Giorgione's The Tempest. What do you feel when you look at it? He didn't ask what I thought. He asked what I felt. The question threw me off balance. We spent the next hour like that, with him gently guiding me, pushing me to connect with the art on an emotional level rather than a purely academic one. He pulled a heavy art book from his satchel and opened it on the table between us. He leaned over my shoulder to point out a detail in a painting, his arm brushing against mine, his breath warm against my ear as he spoke in a low murmur. Each accidental touch was a spark in the dry tinder of my obsession. My internal monologue was a frantic, looping reel of questions. Is he doing this on purpose? Does he know what this is doing to me? Does he feel it too? Or am I just projecting my own desperate longing onto these innocent gestures? I tried to decipher his expression, but his face was a mask of professional focus. Yet I saw things. Or I thought I saw things. A lingering look that held for a second too long. The way his fingers drummed on the table next to my hand. Almost, but not quite, touching. The slight softening of his eyes when I finally articulated a coherent, passionate thought about the use of color to convey melancholy. I cataloged every micro-expression, every shift in his posture, every subtle change in the tone of his voice, hoarding them like precious jewels. Each one was a piece of evidence I would later analyze and reanalyze in the lonely silence of my room. He was watching my hands. I noticed it when I went to gesture at the book and fumbled with my pen, nearly dropping it. His gaze flickered down to my fingers, then back to my face. A slow, deliberate journey. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. What did that mean? Was he just noticing my nervousness? Or was it something else? My mind supplied a dozen different interpretations, each more hopeful and terrifying than the last. I was caught in a feedback loop of observation and analysis, watching him watch me, trying to read the subtext of a story I desperately wanted to be true. The first truly meaningful touch happened an hour in. We were looking at a portrait by Titian, and he was explaining the concept of sprezzatura, the art of studied carelessness. It's about making something incredibly difficult look effortless, he explained, his voice a low murmur. Like this. He reached over and took the pen from my hand. It wasn't a quick snatch. His fingers closed over mine, warm and firm, and for a moment, they just rested there. He didn't pull away immediately. He held my hand, his thumb stroking lightly over my knuckles as he continued to speak about the painting. I forgot to breathe. The entire universe contracted to that single point of contact. The rough texture of his skin against mine, the latent strength in his grip. He was still talking about Renaissance art, but the words were a meaningless buzz in my ears. The only language I understood was the silent pressure of his hand on mine. Then, as slowly as he had taken it, he released me. He used the pen to point to a detail in the book, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he had just shattered my world. My hand felt cold where his had been. I curled my fingers into a fist, trying to hold on to the phantom sensation of his touch. I looked at him, but his expression was unreadable, his focus entirely on the artwork. Was it possible he didn't realize what he'd just done? Or was he the master of sprezzatura himself, making an incredibly bold move look like a casual, meaningless gesture? I felt a dizzying mix of hope and confusion. The tension in the small room became a palpable thing, a third presence at the table. The air grew thick, heavy with everything that wasn't being said. We continued to work on the paper, but the pretense of a normal tutoring session was gone. We were both acutely aware of the space between us, of the invisible lines we were in danger of crossing. The silence between his sentences stretched longer. The casual brushes of our arms as we leaned over the book became more deliberate, more charged. He closed the heavy art book with a soft thud, the sound startlingly loud in the quiet room. I think you have a solid direction now, he said, his voice even. He leaned back in his chair, creating a sliver of distance between us. He steepled his fingers and rested his chin on them, studying my face with that same unnerving intensity. You just need to trust your own voice. You have good instincts, Leo. Thanks to you. I managed, my own voice sounding strained. I just pointed you in the right direction, he paused, his gaze unwavering. But this paper isn't the only thing you've been struggling with this semester, is it? The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. This was it. The loaded interaction. The moment where the subtext became the text. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't lie to him. Not when he was looking at me like that. Like he could see right through my carefully constructed walls to the frantic, yearning creature huddled inside. No, I whispered, the admission feeling like a surrender. He nodded slowly, as if I had just confirmed something he'd known all along. He didn't push, didn't ask for details. He just held my gaze, his hazel eyes filled with a strange, unreadable emotion. It wasn't pity. It was something closer to understanding. A shared recognition. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. It was a silence filled with unspoken confessions, with the weight of my semester-long obsession, with the terrifying possibility of what could happen next. I felt stripped bare, completely vulnerable under his perceptive gaze. He had seen me, not just the quiet student in the third row, but the real me, and he wasn't looking away. We sat in that charged silence for what felt like an eternity. The hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed to grow louder, amplifying the frantic beating of my own heart. The room, which had felt cozy just an hour ago, now felt like a pressure cooker. He hadn't moved, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were still locked on mine, and they were doing all the talking. They were asking a question I was too terrified to answer. Finally, I broke. I couldn't stand the intensity, the weight of his knowing gaze. I looked down at my hands, which were clenched into white-knuckled fists on the table. I should go. I mumbled, the words tasting like defeat. It's late. I've taken up enough of your time. I started to gather my things, my movements clumsy and rushed, a desperate bid to escape the suffocating intimacy of the room. A hand on my arm stopped me. It was his. The touch was firm, not restraining, but a clear, unambiguous signal to stay. I froze, my eyes fixed on his fingers curled around my forearm. Leo, he said, his voice low and steady. Look at me. Slowly, reluctantly, I lifted my head. His expression had changed. The professional mask was gone, the academic distance had vanished. What was left was something raw and unguarded. It was vulnerability. It was the moment of softness I had never expected to see. Do you have any idea, he began, his voice barely a whisper, how difficult it has been to lecture on the sublime beauty of the human form in Renaissance art while you're sitting in the third row, sketching my face in your notebook? The air left my lungs in a whoosh. He knew. Of course, he knew. I felt a wave of shame so profound it was nauseating. My face burned, a hot, painful flush that I was sure was visible even in the dim light. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I had been so obvious, so transparent in my pathetic infatuation. I'm sorry. I choked out, the words getting stuck in my throat. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. Disrespectful. A low, breathy laugh escaped his lips. It wasn't a sound of mockery. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. Leo, it wasn't disrespectful. It was distracting. Incredibly distracting. This was the tipping point. The moment the entire dynamic between us shifted on its axis. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted. He was admitting to being affected by me. The thought was so staggering, so far beyond the realm of what I had allowed myself to fantasize about, that I couldn't process it. He let go of my arm and stood up. For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to walk away, to leave me there with the shrapnel of my exploded world. But he didn't. He took a step back from the table, his eyes never leaving my face. He looked at the cluttered space between us, at the two chairs angled awkwardly towards each other. Then he did something that made my heart stop. With a deliberate, almost casual movement, he reached out and swept one of the chairs aside. It scraped against the linoleum with a loud, jarring sound. Then he pushed the other one back, clearing a direct, unimpeded path between the two of us. The action was so simple, yet so profoundly symbolic. He was removing the obstacles. He was closing the distance. My mind is a blank slate. There is no past, no future. There is only this room, this man, and the deafening silence that crackles with unspoken energy. He takes a step toward me, then another. He moves with a slow, deliberate grace that is both terrifying and mesmerizing. I am frozen in my chair, a spectator to my own life, watching the inevitable conclusion of a story I didn't even know I was writing. He stops right in front of me, so close I have to crane my neck to look up at him. He is a mountain, a shadow that blocks out the harsh fluorescent light. He places his hands on the arms of my chair, caging me in. His body heat envelopes me. The scent of sandalwood and paper is overwhelming, a drug that floods my senses and short-circuits my brain. "Stop thinking, Leo," he whispers, and the command is a plea. "For just a minute. Stop analyzing. Just be here." He leans down, and my eyes flutter shut. I can't watch this happen. It's too much. I feel the soft brush of his lips against mine. It's not a kiss, not yet. It's a question, a hesitant exploration. He lingers there for a heartbeat, giving me a chance to pull away, to say no. I do the opposite. I lean into the touch, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement that is all the answer he needs. The pressure increases. This is the kiss. It's not the frantic, desperate kiss of my fantasies. It's slow. It's methodical. It's a conversation. His lips are soft, warm, and they taste faintly of coffee and something uniquely him. He's teaching me, even now, showing me how this is supposed to feel. It's not about lust, not entirely. It's about connection. It's about the relief of a tension that has been building for months, a tension I didn't even fully understand until this exact moment. I am no longer thinking. I am only feeling. The rough texture of his stubble against my skin. The firm, steady pressure of his mouth. The way his hand comes up to cup the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, holding me in place. A soft sound escapes my throat, a sigh of pure, unadulterated surrender. This is what the ache in my chest was for. This is the moment the humming finally stops, replaced by a symphony. This is right. It feels more right than anything has ever felt in my entire life. He backs me to the whiteboard. My back hits the cool, smooth surface with a soft thud. The sudden chill is a stark contrast to the heat building inside me. His hands are on my waist now, pulling me flush against him. There is no space left between us, no room for doubt or fear. I can feel the solid wall of his chest against mine, the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart. It's a slow, reassuring drum that calms the frantic fluttering of my own. My hands, of their own accord, find their way to his shoulders, gripping the soft fabric of his shirt as if it's the only thing anchoring me to the earth. This kiss is different. It's deeper, more confident. He parts my lips with his, and the first touch of his tongue against mine sends a shockwave through my entire system. It's an act of claiming, of possession, but it's not aggressive. It's a question, an invitation into a deeper level of intimacy. I meet his exploration with my own, a clumsy, eager response that makes him groan softly against my mouth. That sound, that low, guttural noise of approval, undoes me completely. My confession is a broken, breathless thing, whispered against his lips between kisses. I've wanted this. I gasp, the words a truth I've barely dared to admit to myself. For so long. I know. He murmurs back, his voice thick with an emotion I can't name. He pulls back just enough to look at me, his forehead resting against mine. His hazel eyes are dark, his pupils blown wide. I know. Leo, he says my name like it's a prayer, like it's a secret he's been keeping. He laces his fingers with mine, our hands pressed flat against the whiteboard between our bodies. The simple act of connecting our hands, of intertwining our fingers, feels more intimate than the kiss itself. It's a promise, a new connection being forged in the sterile silence of this forgotten room. We stand there for a long time, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air, our heartbeats slowly syncing up. The frantic energy of the first kiss subsides, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of peace. It feels like coming home, like finding a place I didn't even know I was searching for. He hasn't said he feels the same way, not in words, but he doesn't have to. He's saying it with the gentle pressure of his thumb stroking the back of my hand, with the soft, steady rhythm of his breathing, with the way he looks at me, as if I am a masterpiece he is seeing for the first time. Slowly, reluctantly, he pulls away. The loss of his body heat is immediate, and a chill settles over me that has nothing to do with the whiteboard at my back. The silence rushes back in to fill the space he's vacated, but it's a different kind of silence now. It's not tense or charged with unspoken questions. It's heavy, filled with the weight of what just happened. I wrap my arms around myself, suddenly feeling exposed and uncertain. The morning after unease arrives right on schedule, even though it's not morning and we haven't done anything more than kiss. I can't meet his eyes. My gaze is fixed on a smudge on the floor, my mind a chaotic swirl of panic and regret. What have I done? I just kissed my professor. I could be expelled. He could lose his job. The beautiful, perfect moment we just shared shatters into a million sharp-edged pieces of reality. The humming in my chest returns, but this time it's not a dull ache of longing. It's the high-pitched whine of pure anxiety. He doesn't say anything for a full minute. It is the longest minute of my life. I can feel his eyes on me, and I can imagine the expression on his face: regret, disgust, panic. He's probably trying to figure out how to let me down easy, how to undo the last 10 minutes. He's going to tell me it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, and that we must never speak of it again. The thought is a physical blow, and I brace myself for the impact. But the words, when they finally come, are not the ones I'm expecting. Leo, his voice is quiet, gentle. I still can't look at him. That wasn't a mistake. The reassurance is so simple, so direct, that it cuts through the noise in my head. I risk a glance at him. He's leaning against the edge of the large oak table, his arms crossed over his chest. His expression is serious, his brow furrowed, but there is no regret in his eyes. There is only a deep, unwavering sincerity. I've wanted to do that since the day you argued with me about the symbolism of the ermine in Da Vinci's portrait of Cecilia Gallerani, he says, a faint smile touching his lips. You were so passionate, so brilliant. I've been trying to maintain a professional distance ever since. I haven't been very successful, have I? The mention of that specific moment, a classroom debate from 2 months ago that I had replayed in my mind 100 times, is a validation so profound it brings tears to my eyes. He saw me. He remembered. It wasn't just me, alone in my silent obsession. He was there, on the other side, feeling something too. The relief is a tidal wave, washing away the anxiety and leaving a shaky, fragile hope in its wake. I thought I was being so obvious. I whisper, my voice thick with unshed tears. The sketching. It was obvious, he confirms, his smile widening. And I was grateful for it. It was the only thing that let me know I wasn't completely insane for feeling this way. He pushes off the table and walks back over to me, stopping a respectable distance away. He doesn't touch me, and I appreciate the space. He's giving me time to process, to catch up. This is the test. The reality of our situation hasn't changed. He is still my professor. I am still his student. The power imbalance is a stark, unavoidable fact. The semester ends in 2 days, Leo, he says, his tone becoming serious again. Your paper is due tomorrow. I will grade it, along with everyone else's. I will submit your final grade for the course. After that, I am no longer your professor. He takes a step closer, his eyes searching mine. And after that, if you're interested, I would very much like to take you to dinner. At a place with much better lighting than this. It's a conscious choice. A deliberate, carefully worded plan that respects the boundaries of our current roles while offering a clear, unambiguous path forward. He is handling this with a maturity and a consideration that I didn't know I needed until this very moment. He is not taking advantage of the situation. He is creating a new one where we can meet as equals. Yes, I say, and the word is not a whisper this time. It's firm. It's certain. I would like that very much, Julian. Using his first name feels both strange and perfectly natural. It's a seal on our new understanding. A small smile plays on his lips as he hears it. He reaches out and tucks a stray piece of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushing against my cheek. The touch is light, tender, and full of promise. Good, he says softly. Now, let's get out of here before the janitorial staff finds us, and we become a campus legend. We gather our things in a comfortable, quiet intimacy. The awkwardness is gone, replaced by a shared secret, a palpable sense of anticipation for what comes next. He holds the door open for me, and we walk back down the silent, empty corridor of the faculty wing. The world outside the small study room feels different now, brighter, more full of possibility. He walks me all the way to my car, which is one of only a few left in the sprawling parking lot. The campus is dark and quiet, the only light coming from the tall, orange-hued lamps that line the walkways. The night air is cool and crisp against my still flushed cheeks. When we reach my beat-up sedan, we stop, an awkwardness settling between us once more. The script for this part of the evening hasn't been written yet. He shoves his hands in his pockets, looking down at his shoes for a moment before meeting my gaze. "So," he says, "I'll see you in class tomorrow." "Yeah," I reply, my lips curving into a small smile. "I'll be the one in the third row." A low chuckle rumbles in his chest. "I know." He hesitates for a moment, then takes a step closer. He lifts a hand and rests it on my cheek, his thumb stroking softly over my skin. "Get some sleep, Leo." He leans in and presses a soft, chaste kiss to my forehead. It's a gesture of pure affection, a quiet promise that tonight was real, and that the future he offered is real, too. Then he turns and walks away, his silhouette disappearing into the campus darkness, leaving me standing by my car, my entire world remade. I get into the driver's seat, but don't start the engine right away. I just sit there in the silence, my fingers pressed to my lips, then to my forehead. The final reflection begins, a quiet internal monologue that attempts to make sense of the seismic shift that has just occurred in my life. For months, I had been a passive observer, a ghost haunting the edges of my own existence, my only real connection to the world being my silent, secret adoration of a man I thought was completely unattainable. I had built a life around loneliness, convincing myself it was a choice, that it was safer to watch from a distance than to risk the pain of participation. And then, in the space of a few hours, Julian had walked into my carefully constructed solitude and gently, deliberately, dismantled it. He hadn't just been the object of my affection. He had been an active participant in our silent, one-sided relationship. He had been watching me, too. He had seen my yearning and, instead of being repulsed by it, had recognized it as a mirror of his own. He had been the catalyst, the one with the courage to sweep aside the chairs and close the distance. He had invited me into his life, and in doing so, had given me permission to start living my own. I start the car, the engine rumbling to life in the quiet lot. As I pull out onto the empty street, a feeling settles over me that is so foreign I can barely identify it. It's not anxiety. It's not fear, though a small, thrilling sliver of that remains. It's hope, a quiet, steady, and profound sense of hope. The ache in my chest is gone. The humming has stopped. The silence left in its wake is not empty. It's peaceful. It's the feeling of a blank page, of a new beginning. I no longer feel like a ghost. I feel solid. I feel seen. I feel like I've finally come home. And for the first time in a very long time, I am not afraid of what tomorrow will bring. I am eager to meet it, eager to see his face in a crowded lecture hall and know that I am not just a face in the crowd to him. I am Leo, and our story, the real one, is just beginning.